Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to White Lines F1, and today is Sunday. The Chinese Grand Prix is just finished, so here's my race analysis. Now before I kick off, I just want to let you know that obviously only yesterday I uploaded the Chinese Grand Prix qualifying video talking about that, so before you watch this I would advise you watch that first, but nonetheless let's kick it off. So as you look at the standings, you can see that Hamilton came first, Vettel came second, and Max Verstappen came third, and obviously you see the rest of the standings. The big standout there was obviously Max Verstappen for obvious reasons, considering how far he started back in 17th, I think it was. So he went from 17th all the way down to 3rd. So it was a wonderful race for him. So the retirees, first of all, was Fernando Alonso. Feel bad for him because actually he was up in like 7th actually. Van Dorn had already broken down at that stage, but Fernando Alonso was driving pretty darn well. I think he actually was in 8th. I think he'd just been overtaken, but nonetheless he was having a good race. Feel really bad for him. Kvyat retired, he had another breakdown. Van Dorn broke down because I think he had a fuel pump issue. Giovinazzi had another crash. So basically, the way this time it wasn't really his fault. The track conditions were really weird in the race today. So the track was, I think, 80% dry, but 20% of it was wet in patches. And where the grid is, the starting grid, because there's the two bridges by the stands, but it just stopped the sunlight. So there are these two huge patches of wet track, and they just sort of screwed them up. So everyone started on the inters because of those wet patches. And he was on, I think at this stage when he crashed out, I think he had switched onto the soft tires, and basically he drove over the wet patch and he just suddenly became a passenger. The car just slid along the wet patch. He was going in a straight line or slightly off to the left, and when he hit the wet patch, he just slid off straight into the wall. Had another bad crash, which prompted the safety car. The final retiree was Lance Stroll. Unfortunately, he got taken out by Sergio Perez. Although the investigation said that neither Perez or Stroll was at fault because it was a bit of a racing incident. At first it seemed like it was Perez's fault, but if you look at it, when you look at it back from Perez's point of view, he was alongside, or at least his front right was alongside Stroll. So if you look at it that way, Stroll should have kind of given him space, but it was just a racing incident. He was unlucky. Anyways, talking about the race. Now, as I said, the track was about 20% wet. Everyone started on the inters, apart from one Carlos Sainz, who started on the super softs. It was a real gamble, and at first it really didn't pay off, because when he started, because obviously that part of the track was warranting the intermediates and he's on the super softs, he had absolutely no grip whatsoever. The rears were just spinning. He was revving the car like crazy, and all the cars flew past him. He started off in whatever position it was, and he went all the way down to 19th. It seemed like it was only going to get worse, because then on the first corner he then went off. And then when he came back, rejoined the track, he then spun out and actually clipped the wall as well. So at that stage, everyone's thinking he's going to be out of the race or something. But actually, because he didn't have to do a pit when the virtual safety car came out and so on, he literally just walked his way back up the standings and found himself eventually by the end of the race in 7th. Solid race by him. I think he'd be very happy. The gamble eventually did pay off for him. You know, the Inters, because they degraded so fast, because so much of the track was dry, loads of people in the VSC came out, just dived into the pits, including Sebastian Vettel, who at that stage was still in 2nd. But the other people in the top 5, apart from Vettel, they stayed out, so they kept their track position. Vettel went in, and he was really unlucky because he went into the pits under the VSC thinking he was going to get a nice quick pit stop. But then when he did that, then the safety car came out, so everyone ploughed in, and it really screwed up his race, in fact. So he got really unlucky. He went from being 2nd and hopefully coming out into a good position to ending up coming out in 6th or something like that. Obviously, he made his way back up by the end, and we're going to talk about that later. But yeah, that made things a little bit awkward for him. But if you want to talk about how the safety car made things awkward, I think we have to talk about Valtteri Bottas, who was in, I think, 2nd place under the safety car, or maybe 3rd. And under safety car, in his desperation to keep his tyres warm, he spun out under safety car and went all the way down to like 12th. He really messed himself up. It's actually a bit of a rookie error, considering it's Valtteri Bottas, who is quite experienced and he's a very talented driver. He's going to be pretty ashamed of that. And I think he ended up in 6th overall, so he really messed up his race because of that spin. It was so silly, such a rookie error from him. So we've got to talk about Verstappen now. At one stage, he actually found himself in second position because of the way all the pits turned out for him, and also the fact he had an absolutely insane first lap. Literally, I don't know what it is about him, but he is so good in the wet. We saw that in Brazil last year. He absolutely adores the wet conditions. He was so fast. He was so planted, even in those conditions. He always taking the correct line, finding the gaps, walking past people. He didn't have a spectacular first lap in terms of being aggressive and fast. He was just so controlled and calm. He was going for the right space at the right time, and he wasn't even doing any challenging overtakes. He was just he just was finding traction, and it was incredible. He's so good in the dry, in the wet rather, actually in the dry as well. Now I think about it. And it was equally as impressive the way he was doing some of his overtakes, how controlled he is on the brake pedal. Martin Brundle pointed it out, and actually when I was watching the race, I pointed out before he said it, I was thinking it myself, which was, I can't remember who it was he was overtaking, but he did the exact same overtake in the exact same corner in the exact same style back when he was in Toro Rosso in China, and he literally he braked late, braked on the inside, and his feel on the brake pedal is so good. He didn't lock up a tyre in the slightest. He rotated the car nicely. Came off the brake pedal as he turned it in, and he makes those overtakes stick so nicely. He's such a talented driver, and the fact that he went all the way from there to second, and then only because he had to pit, he then went back and worked his way back to third. It just shows how much of an incredible driver he is, and you know, up on the podiums, Hamilton and Vettel were both talking about him, how this dude he's incredible, and no wonder he was driver of the day. So I mean, he fully deserves that. Vettel did some pretty insane overtakes throughout the race, as well as Verstappen, especially to get himself back from 7th all the way up to 2nd. I think the best one of all of them was when he overtook, I think it was Daniel Ricciardo. He was following for ages. It was such beautiful driving, and I would seriously heavily advise go back and watch that competition between Vettel and Ricciardo, because that was pure racing. DRS in the race wasn't particularly effective. In fact, it made the equivalent of no difference. I only saw 1 or 2 overtakes using DRS. For the most part, it was just sort of bringing people closer, but not really allowing the overtaking opportunity. So we saw a lot of pure racing in the Chinese Grand Prix today, and the best one was through Vettel. He got extremely close with Ricciardo. They were really fighting each other. They even touched wheels at stages, and it was quite a cinematic scene, the way they hit each other, and then you could see the dust and the spray from the water, and from obviously the two wheels colliding. So it's quite a picturesque moment, and it was just so wonderful to see. It was a real excitement in that race. Overall, it wasn't the most insane race, but for excitement and intensity, it was wonderful. Raikkonen. Ricciardo and Raikkonen, 4th and 5th respectively, both will feel a little bit hard done. Mainly Raikkonen. Ricciardo I don't think he was just on it today. I mean, 4th is a respectable time, but he just was never as quick as Verstappen, and he gave a really good fight for Vettel and I was going to say and Hamilton. He never competed with Hamilton. He gave a good fight with Vettel, but ultimately, obviously, it's a Ferrari via Red Bull. We know the Ferrari is quicker, and we know Vettel is definitely the second, or maybe, in some people's opinion, the fastest driver out there at the moment. I would personally say Hamilton, but nonetheless, Ricciardo. I think 4th did him justice. I think that was the fair outcome in that race. Raikkonen would definitely feel hard done though, because at one stage, I think when he was in second. He was out. He had a gap to everyone else, but that gap just kept closing and closing and closing, and he really wanted to go into the pits. And the telemetry, the computers and the Ferrari end was saying, actually no, if you stay out, you're gonna finish the race in 3rd. But the tyres were just not holding up. I think he was on the soft side of this stage, and they were saying he's going to stay out and it's going to be fine. And actually, Hamilton was considering trying to stay out as well for the entirety of the race on the softs, but it just wasn't working out. The tyres just weren't there. You got to remember the Raikkonen was following a lot of people throughout the race. Obviously, degradation, the hot air, dirty air would have caused a real impact. But he just wasn't very happy on those tyres, and eventually, the only reason he went into the pits to change his tyres was because he actually said, no, I'm going in, and the Ferrari engineers kind of were like, yeah, go on then. Like, they're very reluctant. They realised they kind of messed up, and you got to feel bad for him because he finished 5th, but by the end of the race he was only a second or two. I think it was only a second or two away from the cars ahead of him. So if he went into the pits nice and early, he would have been on the podium. So real shame for him. Strategy call there, let him down. And that's the... Oh, wait, no. What was I going to say? Yes, so... if you guys saw yesterday's video, I was speaking about Palmer and... Who was it? Palmer and Grosjean, how both of them were under investigation for overtaking Giovinazzi under the double yellows. I said that it shouldn't have made an impact. There was nothing to worry about. Well, nothing to worry about. I personally said there shouldn't have been any repercussions for what they did. But ultimately, they did break the rules, and the FIA decided that actually both of them were going to get 5 pace grid penalties, so they started pretty far back. So, I mean, it didn't make too much of an impact in the end, I suppose, but they must have felt really screwed over. I do feel bad for them, but I guess at the end of the day, rules are rules. It was double yellow, there was supposed to be no overtaking, and they were changing up, they were, accelerating, so that's how it goes. I'm surprised Hulkenberg actually still finished in 12th, because he had, I think, 15 seconds worth of penalties. He had a 5-second penalty for doing, I think this was for overtaking under VSC, and then a 10-second penalty for doing the same thing or similar thing under the safety car as well. So he got a 5-second penalty and then 10-second penalty just to make things worse. So the fact he's probably over the moon that he finished in 12th, to be honest, because even though it didn't make a difference if he came anywhere below 11th, because you get no points. But yeah, that was he definitely got screwed today. And that's pretty much all there's really to talk about. The main thing, I guess, is an overall view on how things are going to be for the rest of the season. What we learned from today is people were talking about in the Australian Grand Prix that even though Ferrari won, that it's not really the best example of what we're going to see throughout the season, because it's not really a proper racetrack, because it doesn't have any long straights and stuff like that. Chinese Grand Prix, the Shanghai track, is definitely a proper racetrack. Lots of long corners, lots of long straights, and tight corners, sweeping corners, low speed corners, everything all in one track. And if Vettel didn't get unlucky in the pits, he would have been really close to Hamilton. He might even have won the race. So it is absolutely 100% certain now that we are seeing the Ferrari and the Mercedes as the 1-2. They are they are only 1 point between each other in the constructors. I think Mercedes are leading. I can't remember what it was. I think they're on 66 and 65 respectively. Hamilton and Vettel are both on 43 points in the driver's standing. It's only been two races, so obviously it's going to be very close. But it's setting out to be an insanely close season, and I'm super excited. The front pack, including, I would put Red Bull in that category, because they still do have good pace, are clearly leagues apart from everyone else behind them in the middle packs. But nonetheless, wherever you look on the track, there should be good racing. And if we can see this, proper, pure, organic racing like we did see today, then it's going to be a thrilling season for overtakes as well, because it is hard doing overtaking, because DRS, as we sort of say, isn't as effective. But it just forces drivers to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more competitive, a little bit more risky, and that is where there's a lot more crashes. That's a lot more when we see a lot more talent coming out in those overtakings. It's more about the drivers rather than just the cars, and that's what we want to see. And that leads on to a podcast I'm going to do later, which is about what F1 is lacking for the fans and what needs to be done and what we're missing. And a lot of that is down to the competitive edge, and a lot is down to the overtaking. And we saw today pure racing, pure overtaking. So things are looking good. Chinese Grand Prix, you could predict how it would have ended. If you didn't see qualifying, you would have guessed that is pretty much how the order would have finished, apart from maybe having Bottas further up. But it was a wonderful race to watch. Some bits were a little bit kind of dragged a bit, but for the most part, it was wonderful. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed this race analysis. If you have, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe, comment below, share this video. That'd be wonderful. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Look out for the podcast. I'll be up in hopefully a couple of days when I do get time to record it, because I was going to do it a couple of days ago, but then I had to do my vlog for the Whitelands football channel. Link to that channel in the description. Check out that vlog. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys later. I need a pee.